Hey guys, today I'll be reviewing Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, an author that I really love. I've read almost everything he's done, all of Riyria Revelations, Riyria Chronicles, the short Riyria stories on Audible. He's an author that I'd read anything by at this point. And I got this one from the publisher. This is the ARC, actually. They also sent me the finished hardcover, which also looks really nice. It's actually got a map inside. This one doesn't have a map inside, but I love floppy paperbacks. So this book is set in the same world as Riyria, but a few thousand years in the past. You could easily start here and read his other books later, just a few little references here and there to things you'd recognize from Riyria if you read them. It's also cool because in the Riyria books you get a sense that there's a lot of history behind the things that are happening, and then this book, Age of Myth, is beginning to give us a sense of that history. The two do feel totally separate from one another, story-wise though, so if you want to start right here, give his writing a try. Age of Myth introduces the separation between Frey and Rune, R-H-U-N-E. Runes are me and you. Runes are ordinary humans, and they're seen by the Frey as animals, basically. We are nothing more than a speck of dirt at best, and the Runes think the Frey are gods, immortal, all-powerful, to be respected and, kept at a distance. A Rune named Wraith is traveling with his father one day when they stumble out of the area that runes have been given to live. And within the first couple of pages, Wraith ends up killing a god that's confronted them for being there and runs away with the god's servant Malcolm. Meanwhile, a woman named Persephone, wife of chieftain Reglan, leader of a town, or Dahl, D-A-H-L, as it's named in this book, called Ren, is confronted by a young mystic named Suri, a sort of off-putting, cryptic, dirty, blunt, and bizarre girl with a pet wolf named Mina, with her premonition of a bad thing, her words, coming that could maybe possibly just perhaps kill all runes. And Persephone is obviously shocked by this, and in many ways due to other circumstances I won't go into that are happening in her doll and in her life in general, is just thrown into a role that she's just a natural at, that she just kind of puts herself into because she sees it as her duty, and she's such a take action kind of person in some truly real ways, not just in a kind of, oh, she's doing awesome kick butt things kind of way, but in a way that showcases how responsible and genuine a character can be. And then there's the Frey side of things. Arion, a tutor to the king of the Frey son. We follow her a bit as well. We get a glimpse into what it's like to be a Frey, and this main Frey city that she's in, it's beginning to change a bit. Somewhat recently, at least what seems like recently for a bunch of creatures that are basically immortal, or at least live for thousands of years, they've discovered this kind of magic that they call the art. And this is a really quite a cool magic system that I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of in this book, and the possibilities kind of feel endless. But at the same time, it feels like there's some limitations to it and to the Frey who practice it. And but the Frey who practice it actually are starting to see themselves above not only runes, but above the other Frey who don't practice it, or who can't practice it. So there's this really interesting shift in the political climate, and when Wraith does what he does at the beginning of the book, that and a few other things some other characters do, a bit of a conflict begins to arise. Frey versus Rune, Frey versus Frey, etc. So there's a lot to love about this book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it from beginning to end. Michael J. Sullivan just excels at taking your expectations and making them more interesting. A common complaint I've heard on the Riyria Revelations and Riyria Chronicles is that it's kind of a typical fantasy. It's typical fantasy tropes a lot of the time, but a lot of the praise I've heard on the Riyria books is that he takes those tropes and makes them interesting again, which I agree with and feel he's done here. Most of all, though, it's the characters. As with Riyria, the main characters really make the story what it is, like Hadrian and Royce, Arista, Gwen, Ulrich, Thrace of the Riyria Revelations and Riyria Chronicles books. These characters are such a joy to read about, and I've actually got a quote here from Michael J. Sullivan on a comment from Goodreads that says, "My characters are generally honorable people doing good deeds," and I'd agree with that. Obviously, there are characters that lead more towards villainy and evil, one in particular in this book that is kind of over the top in a lot of ways, admittedly, but I think this is referring to his main characters, and that is definitely true. And they feel real, like real, genuine people. Wraith, Malcolm, Persephone, Suri, Arion. It does feel like these people existed before the story started, and what they do is for a purpose, serving the world they live in, and not just serving the plot, which is how it should be, in my opinion. and the plot itself is a lot of fun. There's never a dull chapter. Something's always happening, and the book's always moving forward, and the characters are all active in all POVs. Now, there's not a lot of closure in many ways, but there's a lot of cool groundwork laid for the future books, which are already written. And you can tell that this world, he's really thought about it. It's as wide in scope and history as you'd want from an epic fantasy series. Plenty of little Easter eggs hidden in there for people to find in all of his books, whether you've read this first or read the Riyria series first. The characters feel like they belong there, and in this book specifically, the relationships between Rune territory and Frey territory is really interesting, and the relationships between the characters and where they live is also very telling and really adds to both the places and the people. They fit really, really well. And then, of course, Michael J. Sullivan's writing is witty, it's humorous, it's realistic, and it's effortless and entertaining. I never got tired of reading it, and I can't wait for the rest of the books to come out. I think this is a great start to the series. I'm so glad that he's come out with this, and that there's going to be more in the very near future, because like I said, they're all written already. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this, be sure to let me know. If you've read this book, I'd love to hear about what your thoughts on it are. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you later with more.